Good afternoon. Thank you for everyone who's here. On behalf of the children, Chanina, Shana, we're very grateful to be together and very mournful to be together and very touched to be able to say goodbye and a kavod achron to Rabbi Rhoda Rabinowitz, Harav Pinchas Mishulam Zusha, Ben Rav Yosef Ben Sion. We'll begin with Kapitlach Tehillim. We asked Rabbi Tenenbaum from the Ark to come say Kapitel Tehillim. Yeah, Ashrei Ish.
Ashrei Ish shelo holach b'atas b'rashayim v'derech hatoim la'omad Moshe v'leitzim la'yoshav kiyim b'taras Adonai chefto b'saraso yaga yom v'layla v'hoya k'etz shosu al pal yamayim asher pirio yitin b'ito v'aleu lo yibo kol asher yasa yatzliach lo ken harashayim kiyim kamoitza asher tifena ruach al ken lo yakumu rashayim b'mishpat v'chatoim b'adas tzadikim ki hodea Adonai derech tzadikim derech rashayim toved.
We continue with the words of David HaMelech in Tehillim. Mizmor David, Adoni roi lo echsar, binosh desha yar b'tzeini yamei menuchos yenahaleni, nafshi yeshovev, yanchenu maglei tzedek laman shemo, kam ki eilech begeitz al maves, lo yirara, ki ato yimadi, shiftecho mishantecha hema yenachamuni, tarach lefanai shocha neged zorarai, Yishanta b'Hashem eroshi kosi revaya, ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'beis Adonai le'orech yamim. Finally, one more kapitel. Mizmor LeDavid Adonai mi yargar ba'alecha, mi yishkon b'har kadshecha. Holech tamim upol tzedek, v'dover emes b'lvavo, lo ragal l'shono lo asa l'reyu ra, V'cherpa lo nasa v'akrovo, nivza b'einav nimas, v'es yirei Adonai yichabed, nishpa lahara v'lo yamir, kaspa lo nasan b'neshech, v'shochad al naki lo lakach, osa eila lo yimot la'olam. We'll now hear Divrei Hesped. Chazal tell us that the words of eulogies, the words of Hesped, are for a number of purposes. One of them is for us to take a sense and take stock of the loss, to have a haracha, to have a sense of how much we've lost and what is missing from our lives with the loss of the nifter, but also to give cover to that person. Not cover that a person doesn't deserve, not to make up stuff, but just to have a sense of who the person was and of the wonderful life they led and of what they gave to this world. And also, it allows us to enter the process of mourning. It allows us to open our heart to feeling. It allows us to bring our mind to that place, which is not easy to go to, but that the Torah tells us we must go to when we lose loved ones. So I'd ask one of the dear children, his son, Rabbi Dr. Chanina Rabinowitz, to say some words of his dear father.
In his bestseller entitled The Secret of Happy Families, Bruce Feiler concludes that the single most important thing you can do for your family may be the simplest of all. Develop a strong family narrative. A strong family narrative connects children to something larger than themselves. It helps them make sense of how they fit into the world. into the world that existed before they were born. It gives them a starting point of an identity. It enables children to say, this is who I am. This is the story of which I am a part. These are the people who came before me and whose descendant I am. This point was made most poignantly by Moshe Rabbeinu in Parshat Bo. As he prepares Bnei Yisrael for freedom, he does not talk about liberty, nor does he speak about breaking the chains of bondage. He does not mention the arduous road that lay ahead or arouse their curiosity about the land of milk and honey. Rather, he talks about children. 3 times is this theme repeated. V'haya ki omru aleichem b'neichem, ma ha'avodah hazot lachem. V'higadeta levincha bayom ahu lemor, ba'avur ze asa Hashem li, b'tzeiti mitzrayim. And v'haya ki yishalcha bincha machar lemor mazot, ve'amarta elav b'chozek yad hotzianu Hashem mimitzrayim. Moshe Rabbeinu wants to ensure that the story will become part of our people's memory. He wants each generation to pass the story on to the next. He wanted every generation to have an identity by turning history into memory and memory into a sense of responsibility. As I think about the more than 70 years that my father and I spent together, I thank him for that identity that he imparted to me. He passed on a tradition, a legacy of rabbinic leadership that spanned generations and continents, generation after generation. My father was a rabbi, a businessman, a college lecturer, a psychological counselor, a placement professional, an amateur stockbroker, and a rabbi. I think he saw himself mostly as a rabbi, and it was to the rabbinate that he ultimately returned in his 80s and 90s. He did not believe in writing on his father's or his great-grandfather's kapota tales. He told me often that yichus, even being part of God's chosen people, carried with it responsibilities that others did not bear, but that obligated us in tikkun olam with greater passion and commitment. That was how he understood noblesse oblige. So what did my father give me? According to what he told me, approximately 42 generations of rabbis, shelo paska hora'ah. He told me that his great-uncle, the Manastrischer, traced the family lineage back to Rashi, and I can trace the family lineage back to the Chuas Chen. But that's not all that he gave me. He gave me lessons in chesed, and let me review some of those. He taught me that you do things because it's the right thing to do. So, for example, when my grandfather, his father, was dying in Tel HaShomer in Israel, he went to the hospital to be there for his final days. And he went to get his mother and bring her to Chicago during Pesach because she was dying just because she wouldn't eat the food in the Israeli hospital because she didn't like the hechsher and besides, memishnisht. So how could she eat the food in the hospital? He brought her home and gave her the food at home, and she lived for another few months after that. He had a connection to tradition. My grandmother waited, my grandfather's, I think, sister, who was still in Russia, had died, and she didn't want to tell him. So she waited for my father to come to Detroit to visit so that he could do the job and he could talk to his father about how his sister had died and he had to sit Shiva, albeit only for a short period of time. And I remember asking him, so what did you talk about with Zaidi when you had to tell him that his sister had died? And he said, we talked about life and we talked about death, and I told him. He taught me that in the weeks after my bar mitzvah, my parents insisted on going on a cruise of the Greek islands after my bar mitzvah in Israel. This was in 1967, just after the Six-Day War. And we got to Athens, and he realized that he forgot his kinos at home. So where do you get kinos? So we traversed the entire city of Athens to get to the shul so that we could borrow kinos, so we would have something on the ship for Tisha B'Av. Of course, we didn't realize that the Greeks don't say the same kinos that we say, and it was a bust, but we made that trip. He cared for family. Sari and her family, Nava and her family would come to Philadelphia to visit, and they always had their favorite foods that their uncle made for them. And when I came to Philadelphia, I said, don't worry, I'll take a cab, I'll take an Uber. He didn't know what an Uber was. He was trying to figure out what it was going over, because Yiddish was his first language. But he would always be there at the airport to pick me up. The Hesses made a bar mitzvah, he was there. It was hard for him to walk the couple of blocks to shul, but he did it. He made it his business to care. The care and the concern for Rhoda that he had, to the point that he didn't take care of himself. And that was very clear, because after she died, just over a year ago, he basically fell apart because he hadn't been taking care of himself out of his love for Rhoda, whom he told Chana that he really, really missed, and felt very bad that she had gone before him. I remember his driving like a crazy man on Tisha B'Av of 1977 when his first grandson was born. And the Seder was a real event. For those of you who want copies, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I have copies: the Ballad of the Four Sons, the Seder Ritual of Remembrance before Shvo Chamoscha, Waldman's Shuvi Nafshi. You can get it on YouTube. These were staples of our lives that you couldn't do Yontif without them. Chasal Sidur Pesach, Uvemakalos Rivavos, Chad Gadya in one breath, each verse in one breath, homemade moror, no products. My father introduced me to Shlomo Carlebach, to Mudgetz, to Chazanis, to Leibele Waldman I mentioned, to Pinchik, to his Raza de Shabbos and Moz Tzur and Sfiras HaOmer, to David Werdiger, and to some of his favorites, Kol Yisrael Yesh Lem Chelek, menucha v'simcha, yismechu. He taught me to daven. Until this day, I still daven with the nusach that he received from his father before him. And my children daven with that nusach, except for the one who became a telzer. He introduced me to psychologists, Adler, Dreikers, I don't know if these names mean anything to anybody, but Schulman, Mozak, birth order, how we always do things for a reason. And in the end, I think I majored in college in psychology under his influence. We were both Tiger fans. He remained a Tiger fan. Frankly, my dear, I don't give a hoot about the Tigers anymore, but okay. Shana and I grew up as Rabbi's kids, so we had to always do the right thing and look the part and be good. So, v'hayaki shalcha bincha leimor, your son will ask, and I asked questions. And I didn't always agree with my father's answers. We didn't see eye to eye intellectually, but there's an Eitz Hadas and an Eitz HaChaim. And if in the Eitz Hadas we disagreed, in the Eitz HaChaim, which is life itself, it's that part that makes life worth living. I'm thankful for what he gave me. He taught me that I come from an illustrious family, and therefore you have to do more for other people. You have a responsibility to help, and you have to make society a better place. I'll conclude with homework, because in my nature, I'm basically a teacher. So when I was thinking about Eitz HaChaim and Eitz Hadas, I thought, my father taught me to ride a bicycle, and he also taught me to blow shofar. Are those Eitz HaChaim or Eitz Hadas? Tehei nafsho tzrura b'tzrura chaim.
Very beautiful. It's a lot to weave together thoughts of a person's life. And no matter how long the hesped or how beautiful the words, you can never fully capture a person. You can never give them the full haracha and the full weight of who they were. 96 years young, Rabbi Rabinowitz, a long, productive life. And he worked well into his 90s. Basically, before he came to Park Plaza, he was still working in Philadelphia. Tremendous kochos, tremendous spirit. And he had a rare twinkle in his eyes. A shmeichel, something very special. He didn't like to always take my compliments. Often I would compliment him. It was so good to see you. I appreciated your davening, your this, your aliyah, whatever it was. And if that's what you think, he would have a comment or something. He had an anivus to him. He wasn't somebody who wanted trombones and troubadours to laud all the wonderful things he'd done in his life. Pinchas Meshulam Zusha was named for two rebbes or three rebbes? Two rebbes. Pinchas Meshulam Zusha was named for two rebbes, one from the mama's side, one from the tata's side. And his father was also a rebbe in Detroit, Harav Yosef Ben Sion. My wife happens to be from Detroit, and I was talking to people that remember the Rebbe Shul. There was a Rebbe Shul, and he was a Rebbe. Not too many more people remember it anymore, but some people remember it. My wife doesn't remember it, but her mother and grandmother. He was born on December 21st, 1928. it was about Yud Tes Teves. That sound right? Yud Tes Teves. That was his birthday. We are about, 9 days after Asara B'Teves. And here he was, Nifter, on August 5th, and we're a few days after Tisha B'Av. So these ideas of Galus and Geula, of Churban, but of ultimate redemption, were things that surrounded his life. To be a rabbi's son in Detroit, there's a Galus there. It's not a perfect situation, but many times it was a Shana Galus. There was something good about what he was doing. He was in Yeshiva College. He was in Beth Yehuda in Detroit. He learned in Torah V'das. Chanina and I were talking about how he knew Rabbi Frank from Yeshiva days. He was in Yavna Theological Seminary. He got his smicha. And he really touched Jews all over the country. All over the country, he touched people. It was in a time when there were small Jewish communities still, and small communities where there wasn't necessarily a big city, and there wasn't necessarily a Kola or a Beis Yaakov, and a Yeshiva Katana, and maybe just been a Hebrew school or a Talmud Torah. And he was the rabbi there. So he was a rabbi in Claremont, New Hampshire. Anyone heard of that? In Detroit, we've heard of that. I'm going to mispronounce it. Manitowoc, Wisconsin. There was a small shul there, and he served as the Rav there. He was the rabbi there. He was in Virginia Beach. He was in Chicago on the south side. He was a rabbi. He was in South Bend, Indiana. And he was literally all over the place, literally touching Jews in our Breita Gullus all over the place, So we know exactly how many bar mitzvahs he was involved with, how many weddings, funerals, happy occasions, brisses, how many people he gave, unofficial counseling to as a chaplain, as a rabbi, as a professional, somebody who could give counsel and support and succor. And as I said, he worked till he was very old, so he knew Jews of all stripes. When I had the privilege of having him in Park Plaza, and it was wonderful to have him live with Shana and Rabbi Rabinowitz under the same roof, that was very special. We don't always get a mother or a father and a child. We've had it one other time that I've been in there. But it was very special. And I used to get sometimes messages from him to you, because he hadn't seen you in a few hours or a day or something. You get a message back to him. And I always thought of him as a rabbi's rabbi. He was a rabbi's rabbi. He knew about all types of rabbanas. He knew about all types of issues. He knew about all types of situations. He'd seen and done most of them. And he was someone that I wanted to get information from and that I wanted to rely on for advice. And again, he was very unassuming about it. He loved music, as we've heard, Hasidic music, Yiddish music, Chazanish music. And I'd be remiss without talking about his love of humor. You can't forget about his love of humor. He loved a good joke. He would often start his conversation with a good joke. I didn't always relate to all of his jokes. Some of them weren't my flavor, but they were always cute and they were always funny. I'll tell you one joke that I thought of him about. Well, it was not his, at least I didn't hear it from him. And one joke that he did tell me, he told me, how do you know that Mashiach is a girl? I looked at him, I said, I have no clue. Never heard that Mashiach is a girl. Of course it was a joke. He said, because it says, Uval Litzion girl. Uval Litzion girl. That's what he told me. So, it's not my favorite pun, but but I laughed. He got me to laugh. He got another Jew to laugh. Right? It's an old joke about rabbis where they're cleaning out. And I imagine how much cleaning out there's been over the last months. He had to go through his apartment at Park Plaza. That was one chore, but not as big as the chore of going through Philadelphia and seeing what was there. That was another big chore. We find treasures and things we don't know. So this Rebbitzin is cleaning out her husband's stuff and he's cleaning out her stuff, and he comes across a box in one of her closets, and he opens the box, and there are 3 eggs, and there's $2,000 in single bills. So he's very confused. 3 eggs and $2,000. What is this? So she comes home from the supermarket, and he says, I didn't mean to pry through your personal stuff, but I found this box, and what is it? So she said, well, every time you gave a drasha or a sermon that wasn't good, I would go buy an egg. Says, okay, there are 3 eggs in the box. That's not bad. 3 bad sermons over. I've been a rabbi for 60 years. She said, well, let me tell you the other part. She says, every time I would get a dozen eggs, I would go sell them for $1. And there are $2,000 in the box. I never heard his sermons. I never heard his drushes, but I'm sure they were funny. I'm sure they were witty. I'm sure they were creative and intellectual. We are very blessed to have the larger Rabinowitz family as part of our larger family. We're very blessed to have Shana in our community in Park Plaza. These many months, we've been able to spend many visits with Chanina. He's come to give kavod to his father and do kibbud av and be there for him. And of course, the extended Lep family is so wonderful, and we love them so much. And so, someone said to me in the family that this is not a sad levaya. This is not a sad passing. And yes, when a person who's lived a full life and done great things leaves us at 96, Darka Shol Olam, these are the ways of the world. It doesn't mean that we can't mourn. It doesn't mean there's not a velus. It doesn't mean there's not a tinge of sadness, and maybe there are points of great sadness. But we can feel benched, and we can feel blessed to have known someone, to have had a father, a Zaidi, a great uncle, someone in our midst, someone who was a special person, who added a special spark to Klal Yisrael, who touched people up and down the country, and who we will truly have missed, and we are truly honored having known. Yehi Zichro Baruch. May his memory be blessed. We're now going to say a Kel Maleh, and then we're going to say a Kaddish. We're going to just tell them that they're going to bring in a few more people. I think so. Maybe won't. El Maleh Rachamim, Shoched Mamiramim, Hamsei Menucha Nechona, Kanfei Ashchina, B'malas Kedoshim Torim Gezar Harakia Mazirim, Nishmas, Harav Pinchas Meshulam Zusha, Ben Harav Ben Sion Yosef Shalach, Yosef Ben Sion Shalach Le'olama, Bavor, Shitein stuck about Askaris Mishmasa, Beganei, Dente Menuchasa, Lachain Balarachamim Yashrid Besezikol Favlolamim, Vitzur Betzurachayim Es Nishmasa, Adonai Yunachalasa, Yanuach B'Shalom Mishkavo, V'nomar, Amen. You know, sitter?
ויתקדש שמי רבה ועמד יברכי ובותי וימליך מלכותי ויצמח בורקני ובית משיחי וחייכון ויומכון וחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן שמי רבה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה על שמי דקודשה בריבו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה ואמירת בעלמה ואמרו אמן והי של אמר רבה מן שמיה וחיים טובים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן עושה שלום ומרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל וינקו אמן.
So the crew is going to be in Pennsylvania tomorrow. But Shana is going to start